Hey Bookaholics, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you a dedicated series review of The Great Cities Duology by N.K. Jemisin. This series is now the fourth N.K. Jemisin series that I have read in its entirety, and it is The Great Cities Duology, which is an urban epic fantasy story. This series is comprised of The City We Became and The World We Make. In this series, we are following the awakening of New York City. In this world, New York City is the newest city to be awakened. There are several that have come before it, and basically it means that the city now essentially has a soul, and it has garnered itself an avatar, or in this case, it has 6 avatars, one for each of the boroughs. We are following New York as someone is trying to stop its awakening, trying to tamper with its power. And we're following these 6 boroughs as they get together and they begin to understand who is trying not to awaken New York. The villain of the story is someone whose primary purpose is to create conversation. So it is a very conversation, discussion heavy book that very much has its themes at its forefront alongside its characters. My personal experience with this book is an odd one because there are a couple of elements in here that are absolutely crucial to the story that I dislike, but then the rest of the book I love. So we're going to talk about the things that I love first. We're going to talk about why this is such a great series and why I would still recommend it. If you want to hear me rant a little bit, you can stay on and hear me talk about the things that I struggled with. As I said, this series is very discussion heavy. This series is very much an ode to New York, and therefore it is also a conversation about New York, and that includes many different facets. First of all, we have the avatars. The avatars for each of the boroughs are not necessarily exactly the person you would think would be the avatar for the borough, but then you can understand through the narrative why N.K. Jemisin has chosen this specific person to be the one that represents and symbolizes an entire borough, and the conversations that each individual character bring forward are absolutely fascinating. One, because they're not flawless, which no part of the world is flawless, so that makes sense. And also, they are a plethora of different ideologies mixed into one person. So it could be that they are queer, it could be that they are Latino, it could be that they are Black, it could be that they are strong, it could be that the type of strength they possess is very different from character to character. You'll have characters whose strength is resilience, some whose strength is revolutionary, some whose strength is quiet persistence. Each type of strength varies from character to character and is quite symbolic of the area. An area that is poor and yet still persists, or an area that is constantly the center for change and pushing forward and pushing boundaries, or a place that has this quiet resistance, an area of New York that doesn't allow politics to completely change and alter its entire populace every 4 years. You have lots of different things going on with these characters and what they symbolize. The next thing I would like to talk about is I really did appreciate the conversation N.K. Jemisin was trying to have here. It is a criticism of ideologies, of the way the world is going. It is a criticism, especially of America, but the world over, how societies are shaped and how they are currently being shaped. This was written during 2020 as well, so you have a lot of criticism of just the handling of the world at this time. Our villain, as I said, is a symbol for what is corrupting and eroding America and genuine human values. And we also have an interesting conversation around things like privilege, for example. We have one of the avatars affiliating themselves with the villain instead of in favor of the other avatars. That not all boroughs have a kinship just because they are part of New York. And we have this borough that is affiliating because of trauma, because of fear. And that fear and that trauma makes the actions understandable, but not justifiable. And that is what I think N.K. Jemisin did a really good job of, is that even when our characters are not doing what they should be doing and not being good people, it's not just out of the blue, haha, people are evil. So I think the conversations around this are fantastic. The writing style is magnificent. It always is with Jemisin. The plot is very interesting. It's not got a huge amount of plot. It's just these people kind of scrambling around trying to help the city be born. And there's people who have no idea what they're doing, and yet they keep pushing and keep trying to keep this city, to help it live. And that is such an interesting symbolism in its own right. So there were so many elements in here that were really, really well crafted that also bleed through into book 2. We have so many interesting things about the global space, about how the rest of the world would react to something catastrophic happening to New York. We have lots of conversations around the way that new cities, especially cities that are in what is somewhere that has now been deemed almost like an empire, have seen the changes throughout their own cities that have been alive longer than this one, and the interesting conversations that come from that. And I really did appreciate the way that this depicted other cities. I don't think that it did it in a really stereotypical way either. Then the resolution to it also being an interesting choice on the author's part. So for the most part, if you are wanting a conversation about current climate, about the society that we live in, I would highly recommend you check it out. But now we're going to get into some of the issues that I had. Some of these I think are slightly more legitimate issues, and some I think are just personal preference. My main and biggest issue with this is the villain. The villain is this one evil villain. And the villain is representing almost like a disease that is spreading across America. That the idea that we have, the fact that misinformation, that social politics, that the internet are having on the general populace, and how divisive that's becoming. That is what this villain symbolizes. This villain is essentially a global level Karen. And that's fascinating. But one of the problems I have with having one villain to signify an entire ideology is that a person, an individual, can be vanquished, while an ideology sometimes it even needs to be bred out. Sometimes it takes generations for this issue to be cleared. And I'm not saying that Jemisin is acting like this one villain being defeated means that everyone will come by R. I still don't like the idea of one person depicting a plethora of hugely discourse-heavy ideologies. So that was my biggest issue with this. For personal reasons, the other reasons this series didn't work for me is, one, I don't like New York City. I don't actually care about New York City at all. I am done with New York City. I said in the vlog that I read this, New York City, Tokyo, London, Paris are not settings I am ever interested in reading about again. They are overdone and I am done with them. That being said, I think my other issue here is that I went in, even though I know I don't like New York City, because N.K. Jemisin is a New York City resident, I thought that maybe I would get to see an element of New York I don't normally get to see. Everyone says this is an ode to New York City. And there are millions of films set in New York City, so it's hard to bring something new to the table. But I did genuinely think that there would be an element, a layer to this that would be something only someone who lives in New York City would see. Something only someone who has been there for years, not someone who's just vacationed there, would genuinely be able to display, especially with someone of Jemisin's talent. And I just didn't get that. I didn't get anything new out of the New York City-ness of this book. And that's a me thing. But it wasn't I went into this thinking, oh, I hate New York City, but I'll read it anyway. Kind of, I love Jemisin, but also I did think that there would be more to it than I actually got. And my final additional issue that I had with this series, sadly, was that in this second one, we do go a bit further into the idea of multiverses, and I do not like multiverses. I think that the way that they are handled most of the time doesn't suit me. I just don't think that they have enough of a conversation about what a multiverse would mean. I don't like when someone just kind of casually mentions a multiverse. I think one of the things I do really appreciate about, for example, the Spider-Man multiverse movies that we've got going at the moment, the animated ones, I think that they are trying to discuss what a multiverse means and the way that that works and the potential impact that can have. But when they're just kind of casually mentioned, it just feels like a trope instead, and I'm not a fan of that element. But again, that's just a personal thing. I think there are a lot of people who really like multiverses. So the whole New York City element plus multiverse element, that's a me thing. The way the villain is a construct embodiment didn't work for me, and I think that is potentially something that is a little bit less just not a trope I don't like. But yes, great series. I would still recommend it, especially if you're a fan of New York City. Actually, if you like reading about New York City, then you'll have a great time with this, because obviously that's the point of it. It's the central point of this whole series. I have odd, if not mixed, feelings about Jemisin writing a series that isn't a 5-star for me. I gave them 4 stars because I genuinely do think there's so much in here that is really, really interesting discourse. I just didn't love it as much as I'd hoped to. That being said, let me know if you've read this series and your thoughts on it, or if you've read anything else by Jemisin and your thoughts on them. Also, based on my thoughts on this series, let me know if there are any other series that you think I might like, that I might be interested in. And that is all from me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I will hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye.